A woman I know was recently attacked in her own home that she shares with her child when three men broke in, and her immigration status is completely determining her access to help and safety. You want to talk about how these policies put people at risk? Let's do it. It's important to note that she entered this country legally and had legal status for years. It shouldn't be important, but it is. She is highly educated and has multiple degrees, and for many years she was working for her city in Texas on a work visa. Then Donald Trump came into power. While living and working in the US legally, she met and married her husband, who was a US citizen. She and her husband filed for a status adjustment. That means switching her work visa over to a marriage one. During his presidency, the Trump administration was wildly successful at reducing legal immigration, not illegal. Legal, by lowering the number of issued green cards and visas. This woman came here legally, worked here legally, got married here legally, and all of a sudden she was applying for a status change that she was entitled to under an administration that just wanted to lower approvals, just for the numbers. While waiting for her 2018 status adjustment application to be processed, we entered C-19. During C-19, her work visa expired. Eventually, she was told that her application had basically taken too much time, it wasn't approved, it wasn't rejected, but she needed to reapply all over again. So she did. Around this time, her husband had to begin applying for healthcare through the VA because he got sick with cancer. While waiting for that second status adjustment, he passed away earlier this year, just under 2 months ago. Now her status adjustment application for a spousal visa no longer applies. She has to reapply all over again for a surviving relative visa. So for years now, she has been in legal status limbo, despite doing nothing wrong. Around the time that her spouse passed, vandals began targeting her home on numerous occasions. Might I remind you, this was in rural Texas. There was spray paint, tire slashings, her Belizean and Olympics flags were destroyed, and finally a window to her home was broken, something her landlord failed to fix despite numerous reminders. It is through this window that the three men broke in, while her child slept and while she, luckily, did work on her computer. Upon hearing a loud noise and realizing that it was not one of her cats, she quickly grabbed and put her child in a closet. She then grabbed the baseball bat that she keeps next to her, and she fought. From what I heard, pretty fucking valiantly. Two of the men ran off almost immediately, and one remained in the home. A struggle ensued. I'm gonna spare you the details because I don't want to get flagged, but suffice to say, it sounds like he did some damage, but you should have seen the other guy. Her cat even jumped in. Eventually, that third man also made his escape, and a neighbor came out to see what was going on as they were driving off. The sheriff was called, and wouldn't you know it, doubted her story, asking if it wasn't just a boyfriend who didn't realize that they had broken up, asking if it really was all that dramatic. You know, the classics. A bag was found under the window full of zip ties and sharp, pokey things. She has a guess as to what they were looking for, especially in a home where only a woman and her child reside, especially after their only remaining family in the country passed, a member who was also the only one fully protected under the law. Now, we can only speculate, but I will say this. The vast majority of burglaries happen during the daytime, when no one is home. I also don't know what you would need a group of 3 or zip ties for if you're just taking inanimate objects. But that's just me. Regardless of the intent, Texas is a stand your ground state, so I find it interesting that she receives so much pushback to her story. Because of her limbo status and the obvious targeting that had been occurring, she no longer felt safe in Texas, nor dealing directly and in person with the authorities. She packed up her truck and her kid, and they left the next day. She boarded her 2 cats, and then she and her child drove 12 hours to a sanctuary state where they are now staying in a shelter. Ironically, this may mean that she has to refile all over again because her address just changed. Oh, and her special needs kid is immunocompromised, which makes staying at a shelter all the more risky. Not only does she need to find a lawyer, employment, housing, but also a school that can meet her child's needs. She has done nothing wrong. She arrived here legally, remained here legally, and now for the last several years, she has been in limbo and at serious risk despite continuing to do everything correctly. Because these policies and the people behind them don't see humans. They just see a list of names that maybe sound a little funny. If you want to help her out, I will tag her profile below. Now, I can only verify so much, but I have seen photos of her injuries. She's also familiar to me. If you've been on any of my live streams in recent months, there's a good chance you have seen her on one as a guest. I've also been a guest on several of her live streams. If you don't feel comfortable sharing anything directly, that's perfectly understandable, but she also just released a book on KDP. The book is called Imagine Me, and it's about a child of immigrant parents who ends up in the foster system and has a creepy imaginary friend that comes from Belizean lore. Currently, there's only a digital version available because her access to internet is of course limited now, but you don't need a Kindle to read it. I read my Kindle books on my laptop. A physical copy will be available soon. We're gonna figure something out with her sending the proofs to me so that I can help her approve it while she doesn't have a permanent address. Even just engaging with this helps because anything that this brings in will be going to her. Even just making it this far has already helped. So thank you, and please just keep an eye out for your neighbors.